Close to 15,000 retail stores have closed in the United States, victims of the coronavirus pandemic and the emergence of online shopping as a viable, even preferred alternative. What then is the fate of in-store retailing? Joining us today from Australia is Mark Landini of the global design firm Landini Associates, who has consulted with some of the biggest brands and retailers worldwide, including McDonald's, Aldi, Conrad's, and Burt's Bees. Mark, welcome to the Weekly.
Hi, how are you, John?
Thanks for joining us. Mark, the COVID vaccine is becoming more available, and customers presumably will become more comfortable eventually returning to retail stores. So what are some of the reinvention strategies your firm has been recommending to retail clients?
Well, we don't recommend things to people generically. We look at cases individually and respond to those. So I wouldn't say that there's a one-size-fits-all solution for any retailers, really. A lot of them have been struggling with the pandemic, and as you know, retailers are operationally driven, and so that's been taking up quite a lot of their time over the last few months. They are now beginning to change, and they have reflected on that and what that might mean for the future. Those that are still in operation are looking at the size of their stores, and I think there are a lot of challenges with size, because what we've all become more familiar with during the pandemic is actually shopping online. Hence the increase in that usage. And that's allowed us to become a little bit more familiar with that. The retailers that are going to have the biggest problems are the ones that have the biggest space. If you think about it, hypermarkets, department stores, shopping centers, no longer places where you can get everything from anywhere. You can actually get anything from anywhere online. And so therefore, the spaces aren't big enough. They can't fit everything that to compete, if you like, with that online world. So therefore, they have to reassess how they're going to use those spaces. And many of them are looking at what's been talked about for ages as omnichannel, and looking at how they respond and react and use online to benefit their retail spaces. But you know, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. You've contended in the past that improvements to the in-store experience can have a positive impact on online sales and vice versa. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me?
Well, when we've worked with customers who started online and then created physical stores, we found that their sales have, online sales have actually jumped exponentially. I think people like touching things. They like using their senses. It's incredible that over 200,000 years, the human condition has evolved so quickly to engage with smell and taste and sound and touch. And then in the last 20 years, since we've developed online and the smartphone, which I think is probably a bad name for it, we've begun to reduce the use of our senses to a point where we basically are monochromatic in that regard. So I think people do like touching, they do like meeting, they do like talking, they do like engaging, they do like feeling and touching and smelling and all those kind of things. So when you give them that opportunity, they engage with it. Of course, the problem at the moment is that you can kill yourself by going to a restaurant or going to a shopping center or going to a store. So you have to be very mindful of those kind of conditions that we find ourselves in. But we are three-dimensional creatures. We're not two-dimensional graphic designs. And so, you know, we do like engaging. And so therefore, I don't think that that will ever change. I think what you need to do now is actually decide how you're going to modify accordingly, and how you're going to make the shopping experience perhaps different to the one that we previously had. It was always very transactional. You can actually buy fantasies online, as you know, all sorts of different types. And what Net-a-Porter taught us is that you can actually buy really expensive things online as well, because if you don't like them, you can return them, and there's different ways of facilitating that. So I think practicality over fantasy is becoming something that we're all going to focus on a little bit more. I think the other thing is that online has taught us that we're all ADHD morons, and we really do like engaging with something very quickly. You know, we've become very intolerant of slow, if you like. So we want to find things. So when we actually go to physical stores, we really do want to find things very quickly, because we've been taught by the online experience that that is actually possible. So a lot of retailers are affected by that. That fantasy that we now find ourselves living in, the ability to actually click your fingers and demand that something is in front of you instantaneously. And that has an effect on all sorts of different retailers in all sorts of different ways, depending on what they're selling.
Last year in the US, 1 out of every $5 spent at retail was through an online transaction. And almost every so-called expert that I've seen anticipates that number is going to get larger over the next couple of years. If that's the case, you know, what are some of the more specific suggestions you could make to retailers in terms of how they should be changing their physical space in light of this eventuality?
Well, I don't think it's as serious as people make out. I think people always like to look for headlines, and as a journalist, I'm sure you're in search of those.
Sure, guilty as charged.
There are retailers, largely retailers with big spaces, as I mentioned previously, that will have to radically reinvent what they offer and how they offer it. There's no doubt about that. There was a move pre-pandemic for some large retailers to become more localized, simply because space is getting expensive, or they're running out of it, or people's shopping patterns were changing, particularly in food. People were shopping, you know, every day as opposed to once a week. That's changed slightly since the pandemic's been around, but there was a move to localize stores to make them smaller, particularly in food, and to make them closer to the customer. So that's going to continue. And I think this whole notion of local will be explored more vigorously by retailers over the next year or two. Because I think local is about knowing the name of the butcher who's been serving you for 20 years. I think it's about being recognized and rewarded just by your physical presence. And I think people are scared of traveling distances and like things that are familiar. So I think the familiar, which you find when you're, you know, shopping near to where you live, will become very important. And I think actually how large retailers explore that notion will become very interesting. And I don't think it's about putting the name of your location on the shop front or taking a photograph of the nearby beach or whatever, because that's a little bit facetious. I think it's going to be broader and more real than that. And actually, I think it's really about understanding how to engage with the community that surrounds you. Now, I mean, that's a good thing for retailers, because people will be spend more money than they previously did for a can of baked beans. They're willing to do that because it's there. They don't have to travel for it. It's going to be more expensive to sell a can of baked beans because it's harder to get it there, because you know, large distribution centers anymore. So that whole kind of connection between the product getting to the place and purchasing the thing will change, and people will spend more money. But I think they'll be happy to do that. Then you have to think about what you're going to sell them. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You know, I mean, my aunt in Italy used to go to the market 3 times a day. And when I once suggested to her, aged 8, that she could be more efficient if she went once because she had a fridge, she slapped me on the head and said, "You're a very stupid boy. I don't go to the market to shop. I go to the market to gossip. I go to the market to have coffee with my friends. I go to the market to insult the butcher because he gave me a bad steak last time I went there. It's about social interaction. And I think that will become increasingly important. And as I say, I think we are human beings. We are three-dimensional. We're not two-dimensional. We want to engage, and shopping is a very good way of doing that. Particularly in cultures like, in Asia, where the density of human beings is much, much higher than it is perhaps in some parts of America. They all live in very small apartments. Often they don't have kitchens, or if they do, it's normally just a microwave and a sink. Therefore, they're used to actually spending more time outside because not only is it entertaining, but it's just they're surrounded by more space, which they don't have to own. And so therefore, they will eat breakfast on the way to work. They will eat dinner on the way back from work. And their space, which is often concierged because of the apartment, can facilitate online delivery as well. So, it really just depends where you are in the world. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Mark, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. This is a really fascinating subject that a lot of our readers are interested in because they're into retail as well. And thank you very much for your time. It's nice talking to you.
Pleasure. Nice talking to you too, John.
Yeah. This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction. Thanks for watching.